Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, and I'm here to help you for fantasy baseball draft prep in the 2022 season. And I'm going to give you my favorite late round draft value picks for starting pitcher. I'm going to give you some of the pitchers that I think are smart grabs after pick 200 according to industry consensus ADP. Let's get started with a New York Yankee who, rarely are Yankee players undervalued, but in this case, Jordan Montgomery, I think he is going around pick 207. So this is a guy who was finally a regular part of the rotation last season and was really solid. His final numbers are a little bit misleading. So you may not know this, but there are sometimes regular season games played in October. To be exact, October 2nd was the day that Jordan Montgomery was going into his final start with a 3.49 ERA, which these days is pretty good. He just got knocked around, and that one outing, that disastrous start, single-handedly raised his ERA by almost half a run. So he was, pretty good. Not spectacular most of the season, give you that. The one downside to Montgomery is the fact that he really didn't go deep into a lot of games. He's a guy who only went over 6 full innings pitched 3 times, despite being in the rotation all season long. So he only wound up with about 149 innings pitched. Will that change this year? Another year moved from, being injured and finally showing that he can be consistent. They might stretch him out a little bit more. But of course, Yankees have a good enough bullpen that he necessarily won't go the distance in many games. But you know what? He can get you a nice ERA in the 3s. I think that's still somebody you want at the back end of your rotation. This is a guy that did average more than a strikeout per inning. Again, he's not necessarily going to dominate on the hill, but he did have some really good starts, and he doesn't get lit up much other than that one last start. So I like Montgomery. He's a good value. A lot of these younger players, especially for the Yankees coming up, they always have these prospects that look tempting. But in this case, I like Montgomery because we know what you're getting with him, and that's what we want. All right, just a couple picks later, there's a veteran that has probably been mostly forgotten about, and that is Alex Wood with the Giants. Now, here's the thing. Talk about these late round values. I'm not going to discuss rookies or potential breakouts. I already did that. You can check out my breakout video for pitchers and hitters. But in this case, we're talking about guys that you know what you're going to get, and that is consistency. That is somebody who is not going to hurt your team and could have potential to vastly outperform their ADP. So we talk about a guy like Wood. He's been around a while. Look, he's had several good seasons. In fact, he was pretty much a mainstay in fantasy baseball rotations for a while, an all-star in 2017, and it was only the last couple years in 2019 and a very short 2020 that his ERA just got ugly. Now, here's the thing. In those 2 innings, he was hurt, and he only pitched a combined 47 innings across 2019 and 20. So that small sample size, plus the fact that he was hurt, you can kind of throw out the window because last year he was back to his usual form, 3.83 ERA and a 1.18 WHIP. That's the kind of ratios that you want in your rotation, somebody who can help you out there. Now, he also had the highest strikeout percentage of his career over a full season, not counting 2020 is a very short sample there. So he's actually getting a little bit better with age. And here's the best part. Going to San Francisco now, he's going to the best possible ballpark for a pitcher. So we saw very similar situation here with a guy like Kevin Gausman, who was absolutely dominant last year in San Francisco. I'm a little worried about Gausman, and I talked about that in a different video. Going to Toronto with the AL East and, different ballpark, of course, much better lineups he's going to face, the American League. Now it's the opposite situation. You got a guy like Wood. Is he going to be this year's Gausman? I'm not going to go that far to say he's necessarily going to be a top 20 pitcher, but this is a guy we know what he can give you. He does have good strikeout ability and favorable situation here. Don't sleep on Wood. I think this is a guy who will make a strong comeback, so I love getting him at the end of drafts. All right, let's talk about another favorable situation, a guy switching teams. That is Steven Matz, formerly of the Mets. Last year, kind of a career revival with Toronto. And look, if he could do it in that situation, just imagine now that he signed this deal with St. Louis. So first of all, as I mentioned, the division does matter. So going to the NL Central from the AL East, there couldn't be much more of a drastic difference in terms of the offenses he's going to face. Instead of playing the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Rays, now he gets to face teams like the Cubs pretty regularly and the Pirates. The Reds looks like they're going to cut some more salary. Not too fearsome there. So He's going to get a more favorable schedule, better ballpark, and don't forget St. Louis, just a better situation because this is a team that always develops pitching and has solid pitching on its side. Matt's now being a veteran, you know what you're going to get with him. So what are we going to get? Well, you're not going to get a ton of Ks, right? 22% strikeout rate last year, pretty much on par with his career average, but you're also not going to get a lot of walks, and that's what keeps the whip low, right? 70% walk rate, that is really good. And so you think a guy who's a ground ball pitcher now, what also helps him, the fact that going to St. Louis, he's going to one of the best defensive teams in the majors. St. Louis was number 2 last year in defensive runs saved. So this is a team that's going to help him out, especially being a ground ball pitcher. I can see him getting through a lot of quality starts. So he won't light it up in terms of Ks. That's the only thing. But again, at this point, talking about a late round value, a guy that can be kind of an anchor at the back end of your rotation, you don't get much safer than Matz. All right, this next name will be very familiar if you've watched baseball for the past decade or so. Carlos Carrasco of the New York Mets now. So, I mean, one of the top pitchers in fantasy for several years when he was with Cleveland. And ever since coming to New York, it's just been injuries, of course. Unfortunate his battle with leukemia. He's somebody who has just not pitched a lot. And then last year when he did get back to pitching, it wasn't good, right? A 6.04 ERA. So here's the thing. Number one, it's health, right? Health is the big question. Is he going to be on the mound, and for how long? If he does stay on the mound, then what are we going to get? Is he done kind of being an effective pitcher? Well, there is some hope because that ERA, ugly as it was backed up by a 4.44 Sierra, a skilled independent ERA. And so that's a sign that he did have some bad luck. Also, of course, had some injury issues. He did have surgery in the offseason to remove a bone spur from his elbow. If he recovers from that, he might not be ready in time for opening day, but that's okay because, again, we're talking about a late round pick, a guy that you don't necessarily depend on. If he can get back to pitching within the first month or so and is back full healthy, we might see shades of the former ace. He's in a favorable park for a fly ball pitcher like he is. And don't forget the Mets did improve their offense, especially where they needed it most, with Starling Marte going to center field. That slides Brandon Nimmo, an excellent defender, to right, where they had some trouble. And Eduardo Escobar, third base. This should be a better defense. So everything might line up for Carrasco to be a nice, sneaky late round pick. And then the final starting pitcher I want to talk about, a guy that's probably not even going to get drafted in a lot of redraft leagues, but let's talk about Merrill Kelly of the Diamondbacks. So Diamondbacks pitchers just were playing bad across the board last year. There is some hope because a new pitching coach in Brent Strom is coming over. He's had a lot of success grooming pitchers like some young White Sox pitchers the last couple of years, and in the past working with the Astros. Maybe this is the key to kind of turning around the fortunes of some of these veteran pitchers in Arizona, like Kelly, like Mad Bum. So we'll see what happens. Now, Kelly will not ever blow away hitters with his stuff. He's got a pretty average fastball. But if they can find a way to get him to utilize that fastball less and rely on his above average breaking stuff, that might be the key to kind of keeping him consistent. Now, he did have some injury issues as well. There's always some injury risk here with these late round guys. There's nothing serious. Kelly should be ready for the beginning of the season. This is a player that could help with your ratios, kind of Steven Matz-esque. Not in as good a situation, so I'm not as high on him as nobody else is either. But again, for a last round flyer, for a guy who can at least give you some innings and stabilize your ratios to some degree, I like him as a nice late round starting pitcher to fill out your rotation. All right, those are some of my favorite late round value picks as starting pitcher. Also going to talk about hitters, so don't forget to check out that video if you haven't already. Here to help you win for fantasy baseball all year long. All right, thanks for watching.